Judge Evelyn Thompson woke up early that morning, just as she always did, the sunlight spilling gently through the lace curtains of her bedroom. She stretched slowly, feeling the stiffness of age in her joints. But her mind was sharp as ever. She brewed a cup of coffee and sat by the window, sipping it slowly while looking out at the quiet neighborhood. Birds chirped in the trees, and the faint hum of morning traffic created a calm rhythm that she had grown to love. Today was meant to be ordinary, a simple errand to pick up groceries from the local store, nothing more, nothing less. She dressed carefully in a comfortable sweater and slacks, her silver hair neatly tied back. Her reflection in the mirror reminded her of the years she had spent on the bench, the countless cases she had presided over, the long nights reviewing files, and the weight of justice she carried on her shoulders. Despite her age, she walked with dignity, a gentle confidence that came from a lifetime of knowledge and experience. Her neighbors often greeted her warmly, many of them remembering her rulings in local cases that had shaped the community. As she stepped out of her house, the cool morning air filled her lungs, and she smiled at the familiar sights. The corner bakery, the children walking to school, the elderly men sitting on benches playing chess. She waved at Mr. Daniels, the mailman, who tipped his hat with a grin. Life in her neighborhood was peaceful, predictable, and she liked it that way. She locked the door behind her and walked steadily to her car. The leather of the steering wheel smoothed beneath her hands. She felt grateful for another day, another chance to move through life with calm and purpose. At the grocery store, she was greeted by the familiar hum of fluorescent lights, the faint aroma of fresh bread, and the soft chatter of other customers. She moved slowly but steadily through the aisles, carefully picking out the items she needed. Fresh vegetables, milk, eggs, a loaf of whole grain bread, and a small container of her favorite tea. As she reached for a can of soup from the top shelf, a young mother smiled at her and thanked her for holding the spot in line. Evelyn nodded politely, returning the smile, enjoying these small human connections that made life feel connected and warm. She noticed the store manager arranging some promotional displays and waved, knowing him from years of shopping there. Everyone seemed to know her, and she knew them. It was a place where she felt seen, respected, and ordinary, yet somehow special. Her errands were never rushed, and she enjoyed the simple act of choosing her groceries carefully, examining labels, thinking about her meals for the week, and taking her time. Today, she thought, would be just like any other day, calm and uneventful. But as she moved toward the checkout, a subtle tension in the air went unnoticed by most. Evelyn was focused on counting her coupons and organizing her shopping bag, unaware that someone was watching her more closely than usual. The security cameras above whirred quietly, recording every moment, but nothing seemed out of place yet. She smiled at the cashier, a young man who always greeted her kindly, and began to place her groceries on the conveyor belt. The soft beep of items scanning into the system felt comforting, ordinary, normal. Outside, the sunlight had grown warmer, and a light breeze played with the leaves of the trees lining the street. People walked by carrying coffee cups and morning newspapers, exchanging small greetings. Evelyn finished packing her groceries into her reusable bags and headed to her car. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, savoring the ordinary peace of the morning. Little did she know that within moments, this ordinary day would turn into something extraordinary, something shocking, and something that would test her patience, her dignity, and her belief in justice. As she slid into the driver's seat and adjusted her rearview mirror, she hummed softly to herself, a tune from a long-ago childhood. She had no idea that the eyes watching her from across the parking lot belonged to an officer who had already made up his mind. The calm, ordinary morning she had cherished was about to collide with prejudice, misunderstanding, and abuse of authority. But in this moment, she was unaware, smiling gently, enjoying the sunlight, the fresh air, and the simple satisfaction of a life lived with dignity. Evelyn started her car, the engine purring quietly, and pulled out of the parking space slowly, careful not to disturb the other shoppers. She thought about her plans for the afternoon. maybe a quiet cup of tea with a friend or a short walk through the park. She felt grateful for her life, her career, and the community that had always respected her. Little did anyone know that her ordinary day was about to become a headline that would shock an entire city, and yet, even in the face of injustice, Evelyn Thompson's resilience, dignity, and courage would shine through. Evelyn Thompson had just parked her car in the small lot behind the grocery store. The morning sun reflecting softly on the pavement, she stepped out slowly, carrying her reusable bags, feeling calm and satisfied after a simple, ordinary shopping trip. But across the lot, a police car idled, and inside sat Officer James Reynolds, a man with a reputation that was whispered about in the local precinct. Known for his quick temper and his history of complaints about bias, he noticed Evelyn as soon. As she exited the store, something in his expression tightening, a judgment forming before any wrongdoing had even occurred. Evelyn walked toward her car, unaware of the officer's eyes following her. She adjusted the strap on her bag and hummed softly, the breeze rustling the leaves above. Her day had been simple, peaceful, and she had no reason to suspect trouble. But as she reached for her car door, Officer Reynolds stepped out, his uniform crisp, badge gleaming, and approached her quickly, his tone sharp and accusatory. "Ma'am, hold on a second," he said, and Evelyn looked up, startled, meeting his gaze calmly, unsure why he was speaking to her in such a demanding way. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely, her voice steady and measured. She had dealt with conflict many times in her career, but this was different. Something about the officer's demeanor made her uneasy. Reynolds pointed at her shopping bags, his expression unreadable. "These groceries. I need to check them, ma'am," he said, implying wrongdoing that didn't exist. Evelyn blinked, confusion and disbelief crossing her face. "Officer, I assure you, I purchased these items legally, with my own money. There must be some misunderstanding," she replied, trying to remain respectful. The officer's tone grew more insistent, and a small crowd of shoppers began to notice the tension, whispering to each other, their eyes wide. Evelyn could feel the unease in the air, the calm of her morning dissolving into something tense and alarming. She had never felt this kind of scrutiny before, especially not for doing something as ordinary as buying groceries. She held her bags tightly, standing tall, refusing to show fear, though a knot of frustration tightened in her chest. Reynolds stepped closer, ignoring the growing crowd. "I said I need to check your groceries now," he repeated, his voice rising. Evelyn shook her head gently, trying to reason with him. "Officer, there is no reason for this. I am a retired judge. I have done nothing wrong. I would like to leave now," she said, her words firm but calm. The officer seemed unmoved by her explanation, his judgment clouded by bias. He attempted to reach for her bag, and Evelyn instinctively stepped back, holding her ground. Shoppers began recording with their phones, sensing that something unfair was happening. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the lot. One young man stepped forward, politely asking the officer to explain his actions, but Reynolds waved him off, focused entirely on Evelyn. The tension escalated, the air thick with anger, fear, and confusion. Evelyn's heart pounded, but her mind remained sharp. She knew that reacting aggressively could escalate the situation further. Finally, Reynolds made a decision that would shock everyone. He called for backup, claiming she was resisting authority. Evelyn felt her dignity being stripped away in front of strangers, humiliation washing over her. Yet she held her head high, refusing to let fear dictate her actions. She raised her hand slightly, a gesture of peace. "Officer, I will comply with the law, but I will not tolerate discrimination. I am a citizen, and I expect to be treated with respect," she said, her voice steady. Within moments, another officer arrived, and the scene drew the attention of the entire parking lot. Cameras flashed, phones recorded every movement, and whispers of outrage filled the air. What had started as an ordinary grocery trip had turned into a confrontation that no one expected. Evelyn's calm demeanor in the face of blatant prejudice caught the attention of bystanders, and her courage became immediately evident, even as the officer insisted she be detained. In that moment, Evelyn Thompson, a woman who had spent decades defending justice in the courtroom, realized that her fight for fairness was not over. It had simply moved into a new arena, a public stage where her dignity, her rights, and her courage would be tested. The ordinary morning had become extraordinary, a battle of principles unfolding right in the parking lot. And even as fear and frustration tried to creep in, Evelyn's resolve remained unshaken. She knew that no matter how unjust the situation, she would face it with the same composure and courage that had defined her career. The video of the shocking incident at the grocery store went viral almost immediately. Evelyn Thompson's calm and dignified stance against the officer's aggression captured the attention of viewers across the city. Social media erupted with outrage. The hashtags #JusticeForJudge and #RacialInjustice trending within hours. People shared the footage, adding their own messages condemning the blatant abuse of authority. The story spread like wildfire, and soon it was no longer just a local matter. It had become a national conversation about race, power, and accountability. News outlets picked up the footage, playing it repeatedly on television and online. Anchors expressed disbelief at the officer's actions. Experts in civil rights appeared to analyze the situation, and community leaders called for immediate action. Evelyn, meanwhile, was still processing what had happened, the humiliation of being detained over groceries weighing on her. But she also felt a surge of resolve, realizing that her quiet life had been thrust into the center of a fight far bigger than herself. People from all walks of life voiced their support for her. Messages poured in from former colleagues, local residents, and strangers across the country. Many praised her composure, pointing out that most anyone else in her position might have reacted angrily, escalating the situation. But Evelyn had remained calm, proving that dignity and courage could stand strong even in the face of blatant prejudice. Community organizations began organizing peaceful demonstrations outside the police department, demanding accountability and a full investigation. Signs were raised, chants filled the air, and the energy of collective outrage became impossible for city officials to ignore. The mayor's office released a statement, expressing concern and promising a review of the incident. But many felt it was too little, too late. People demanded that Officer Reynolds be held responsible for his actions, calling for disciplinary measures and an apology. Local newspapers featured Evelyn's story on their front pages, describing her as a symbol of resilience and integrity. The courtroom experience she had endured for decades now became her armor in real life, giving her the courage to face public scrutiny while maintaining grace. Meanwhile, social media users debated every detail of the encounter, analyzing the body language of both Evelyn and the officer. Some criticized the police department's handling of similar cases in the past, citing a pattern of racial profiling. Others shared personal stories of discrimination, creating a wave of empathy and solidarity that made the incident resonate far beyond the city. Evelyn watched from a distance as her private life became public, feeling a mix of shock and determination. She realized that the only way to reclaim control was to respond legally, strategically, and with unwavering resolve. As the outrage grew, community leaders organized town hall meetings, bringing together citizens, police representatives, and activists to discuss the broader issues of bias and abuse of power. Evelyn's name became central to these discussions, her story a catalyst for conversations that many had avoided for years. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but she understood that this moment could make a difference, not just for herself, but for countless others who had suffered silently. The officer's attempt to intimidate her had instead ignited a fire for justice. By the end of the week, the city council held an emergency session to address public concerns, acknowledging the viral outrage and the need for immediate reforms. Evelyn's experience was cited as a wake-up call, a reminder that authority must always be held accountable, and that courage, even in the most ordinary moments, could inspire change. People began donating to legal defense funds, signing petitions, and attending rallies, creating momentum that could no longer be ignored. The ordinary grocery trip had transformed into a defining moment in the city's history, a story of injustice met with resilience and a community refusing to stay silent. Evelyn herself remained composed, aware that public attention was powerful but fleeting. She prepared for the next steps carefully, knowing that true justice would require patience, persistence, and careful planning. The outrage outside the store was now mirrored in courtrooms, city offices, and living rooms across the nation. Everyone watching could see the courage of a woman who refused to be humiliated. A judge who had dedicated her life to justice, now demanding it for herself and for a city that needed a lesson in fairness. After the incident went viral, Evelyn Thompson knew that she could not let it go. The humiliation she endured was too public, too blatant, and it demanded a response. She contacted her longtime attorney, Marcus Reed, a sharp, experienced lawyer who had handled civil rights cases before. Marcus listened carefully as Evelyn recounted every detail, her voice steady, her memory precise. She explained how Officer Reynolds had approached her, accused her without reason, and escalated the situation in front of witnesses. Marcus nodded, his mind already racing through legal strategies. "We're going to make sure the city takes this seriously," Marcus said firmly, his tone calm but determined. Evelyn felt a surge of hope, knowing she had someone who would fight with as much determination as she had shown her own career. Together, they began preparing the legal documents, gathering evidence, and identifying witnesses who had recorded the confrontation. Every video clip, every phone recording, and every eyewitness account became crucial pieces of the puzzle. Evelyn reviewed them all meticulously, making sure nothing was overlooked. Marcus immediately filed a formal complaint with the police department and prepared to file a civil lawsuit against both Officer Reynolds and the city. The complaint cited racial discrimination, abuse of authority, and violation of her civil rights. Evelyn was nervous about the public scrutiny, but she also understood that this was a fight for justice, not only for herself, but for others who had been treated unfairly. The lawyer emphasized that the case would likely attract media attention, but Evelyn was ready, her decades on the bench having taught her to remain composed under pressure. As the lawsuit moved forward, the city attempted to downplay the incident, issuing vague statements about internal reviews and procedural protocols. Evelyn and Marcus were not intimidated. They meticulously documented every interaction, collecting statements from store employees, shoppers who had witnessed the confrontation, and community leaders who had rallied behind her. Each detail painted a clear picture of Officer Reynolds' misconduct and the city's responsibility to prevent such abuse. The legal battle began quietly at first, with pretrial motions and hearings that tested Evelyn's patience. She attended each session with quiet dignity, arriving early, dressed neatly, and prepared to present her side with clarity and honesty. Marcus guided her through each step, explaining what to expect, what questions might be asked, and how to maintain her composure. The media continued to follow the case closely, broadcasting snippets of the hearings, but Evelyn focused on the work at hand, understanding that patience and preparation would be her greatest allies. Meanwhile, public support remained strong, with community members sending letters of encouragement and legal organizations offering advice and resources. Evelyn felt a renewed sense of purpose, realizing that her fight had inspired many to speak up against injustice. She knew that this case could set an important precedent, showing that no one, regardless of position or power, was above the law. Even as the city attempted to settle quietly, Evelyn insisted on holding them accountable fully, refusing to accept a minor apology or token compensation. As weeks turned into months, the legal strategy became more complex. Marcus uncovering prior complaints against Officer Reynolds, demonstrating a pattern of bias and misconduct. These findings strengthened Evelyn's case and increased the pressure on city officials. The courtroom became a stage for truth, where every testimony, every piece of evidence, and every argument mattered. Evelyn drew strength from the knowledge that she had lived a life dedicated to justice, and now she was using that same knowledge to defend herself. Through it all, Evelyn remained calm, never allowing anger to dictate her actions. She met each obstacle with careful planning and dignity, understanding that the fight was not just for compensation, but for justice, accountability, and a message that racial discrimination in any form would not be tolerated. The ordinary grocery trip that had turned into a public humiliation was now transforming into a historic legal battle, one that would test Evelyn Thompson's resilience and courage, and ultimately define her legacy. As the legal battle unfolded, the story of Evelyn Thompson began to capture the attention of local and national media. Reporters arrived at the courthouse and outside her home, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward, eager for a statement. Evelyn maintained her composure, stepping carefully through the crowd, her dignity intact. She spoke with calm authority, explaining that she was seeking justice, not revenge, emphasizing that the case represented a fight against racial discrimination, an abuse of authority. News outlets ran detailed stories, showing clips of the grocery store confrontation, highlighting Evelyn's calm and collected demeanor. People were stunned that an elderly judge could be treated in such a disrespectful and humiliating way. The headlines were everywhere. Judge detained over groceries. Elderly judge faces racist abuse. City under fire for police misconduct. And the story quickly became a national talking point. Evelyn's name was mentioned alongside civil rights leaders, her actions resonating with those who had experienced similar injustices. Talk shows invited her legal team to discuss the implications of the case, and social media continued to buzz with support. Thousands shared messages of encouragement, praising her courage and resolve. Memes and posts went viral, emphasizing the contrast between the officer's aggression and Evelyn's calm dignity. Even late-night hosts referenced the incident, drawing attention to the larger issues of racial profiling and police accountability. The media coverage brought more witnesses forward, some of whom had previously hesitated to speak. Employees from the grocery store offered statements, confirming Evelyn's account, and bystanders submitted videos captured on their phones. Each new piece of evidence strengthened her position, and the public attention made it harder for city officials to ignore the situation. Community leaders organized press conferences, explaining why this case was important for the city and for the nation. They called for immediate reforms, stronger police oversight, and justice for Evelyn Thompson. Evelyn herself observed the media frenzy with a mixture of disbelief and resolve. She had lived decades in the public eye, but never as a subject of outrage and admiration simultaneously. She realized that the attention could be a powerful tool, amplifying the message that discrimination would not be tolerated. She met with journalists cautiously, sharing facts and clarifying details, always careful not to let emotions cloud her words, knowing that clarity and honesty would strengthen her cause. Local TV stations interviewed her neighbors and community members who described Evelyn as a kind, intelligent, and fair-minded woman. Their words painted a portrait of someone deeply respected and admired, yet vulnerable to prejudice in a society that still struggled with systemic issues. Public outrage grew as people saw the stark contrast between Evelyn's character and the officer's behavior. Many called for accountability, not just for Officer Reynolds, but for the city itself, demanding reform and cultural change within law enforcement. Columnists and opinion writers weighed in, highlighting the historic significance of the case. They argued that Evelyn Thompson's courage could inspire others to stand up against injustice. No matter how intimidating the circumstances, social media campaigns raised awareness. With hashtags like #JusticeForJudge and #InRacialBias trending globally, the story became a symbol of resilience, dignity, and the fight for equality, capturing the attention of activists, politicians, and ordinary citizens alike. Despite the spotlight, Evelyn remained focused on her legal strategy, understanding that media attention alone would not deliver justice. She knew the courtroom would be the ultimate stage where her dignity and perseverance would be tested, yet the widespread coverage bolstered her morale, showing her that countless people were watching, supporting, and believing in the fight against injustice. Every article, every broadcast, and every social media post reinforced the importance of standing up for what is right. By the end of the week, Evelyn Thompson was no longer just an elderly judge detained over groceries. She had become a symbol, a voice for those who had been silenced, and a reminder that courage and integrity could inspire change even in the most ordinary circumstances. The media spotlight shone brightly, illuminating both the injustice she faced and the extraordinary strength she displayed. The story of one ordinary morning in a grocery store had grown into a movement demanding fairness, accountability, and respect for all. The courtroom was tense the morning Evelyn Thompson walked in, the air thick with anticipation. Reporters crowded the hallways, cameras set up in every corner, while city officials and police representatives prepared to defend their actions. Evelyn entered calmly, her posture straight, carrying a quiet confidence that came from decades on the bench. She greeted her attorney, Marcus Reed, with a nod, and together they took their seats, ready to face what could be the most important legal battle of her life. From the very first testimony, it was clear that the proceedings would be intense. Witnesses were called to the stand, including shoppers who had recorded the incident on their phones. Their statements painted a vivid picture of what had happened in the grocery store, describing the officer's aggressive behavior, his unreasonable accusations, and Evelyn's calm, dignified responses. Every detail seemed to strengthen her case, making it impossible for the city to claim innocence or misunderstanding. The city's lawyers tried to downplay the incident, arguing that Officer Reynolds had been performing routine checks. Evelyn listened quietly, refusing to react publicly, knowing that showing anger or frustration could weaken her credibility. Marcus countered every point with precision, highlighting inconsistencies in the officer's story and presenting evidence that revealed a pattern of misconduct. The judge presiding over the case occasionally glanced at Evelyn, noting her composed demeanor, and seemed increasingly attentive to the clear, methodical presentation of her side. The tension in the courtroom grew as more evidence was presented, including security footage that showed the officer approaching Evelyn without cause, raising his voice unnecessarily, and attempting to intimidate her. Evelyn remained calm, her eyes steady, every gesture measured. She did not flinch under the pressure. Her decades of experience judging cases gave her an edge, an understanding of how truth and integrity could sway opinions even in high-pressure situations. Marcus called Evelyn to the stand, asking her to recount the events with clarity and detail. She spoke slowly and deliberately, describing the moment the officer approached her, how she had tried to reason with him, and the humiliation of being detained in front of bystanders. Her voice was firm yet composed, and her words resonated throughout the courtroom. Every listener could feel her dignity, her unwavering sense of justice, and the injustice she had endured. The city's attorney attempted to discredit her testimony, suggesting that she had overreacted or misinterpreted the officer's intentions. Evelyn did not falter, calmly clarifying every point, explaining that there was no legal justification for the officer's behavior, and that the confrontation had been both racially biased and unnecessary. The witnesses backed her up, confirming that her account was accurate, and the footage clearly contradicted the officer's version of events. As the day progressed, the courtroom became a stage for more than just a legal dispute. It was a battle of principles, with Evelyn representing dignity, justice, and truth, while the city and the officer symbolized unchecked authority. The public followed closely, with updates streaming online and news networks broadcasting live. Each revelation, each piece of evidence, made it clear to viewers that Evelyn's courage had turned an ordinary grocery trip into a historic fight for accountability. By the time the final arguments were made, the tension had reached its peak. Marcus delivered a closing statement emphasizing Evelyn's calm bravery, the indisputable evidence, and the broader implications for civil rights and racial justice. The city's lawyers responded, but their words lacked the strength and authenticity of Evelyn's narrative. The judge listened carefully, taking notes, visibly weighing the moral and legal weight of every testimony. And as Evelyn exited the courtroom that day, she felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing she had presented the truth with integrity and strength. The courtroom drama had revealed more than just a personal injustice. It had exposed the flaws in the system and the need for accountability. Evelyn Thompson had shown that courage, dignity, and truth could confront prejudice head-on, and the stage was now set for a verdict that could change not only her life but the lives of many who faced similar discrimination. The fight for justice was far from over, But Evelyn's resolve and composure had already inspired countless others to believe that standing up against injustice was not only necessary, but possible. The courtroom was unusually quiet as the judge prepared to deliver the verdict. Evelyn Thompson sat with calm dignity, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her heart beat steadily, a quiet rhythm of patience and determination. After months of preparation, testimony, and public scrutiny, this moment would decide not just her fate, but also send a message about justice, fairness, and accountability. She glanced at Marcus Reed, her attorney, who gave her a reassuring nod, reminding her that truth and integrity were on her side. The judge's voice broke the silence, reading the carefully considered decision. Every word seemed to hang in the air, heavy with meaning and consequence. The city had failed to protect the rights of its citizens. The officers' actions were found to be discriminatory and abusive, and Evelyn Thompson was awarded a settlement of $1.5 million in damages. Gasps of relief and applause rippled through the courtroom, some suppressed, some overt, as people realized that justice had finally been recognized. Evelyn remained composed, her expression calm, but her eyes shimmering with the emotion of vindication. This was more than just money. It was recognition of her dignity, her rights, and the principle that no one, regardless of age or status, should ever be humiliated or discriminated against. The city officials present looked tense, the weight of accountability pressing down on them. They knew that this case would become a reference point for future incidents, a reminder that citizens deserved fairness, transparency, and respect. Outside the courtroom, crowds had gathered, news reporters buzzing with excitement. Bystanders cheered, holding signs that celebrated Evelyn's courage. The hashtags #JusticeForJudge and #CivilRightsVictory trended once again on social media, spreading across the country as people celebrated the outcome. Evelyn's story had become symbolic, a testament to the power of standing up against injustice and the resilience of those who refused to be silenced. Her family, who had waited anxiously throughout the proceedings, embraced her tightly, tears of relief and pride streaming down their faces. Evelyn felt their support deeply, knowing that this victory was shared, not just personal, but a triumph for everyone who had suffered from unfair treatment. Marcus Reed smiled, proud of the strategy, preparation, and unwavering determination that had brought this result. He reminded Evelyn that her courage had set a precedent, ensuring that future incidents of discrimination would face accountability. The city, now facing scrutiny, promised reforms in their police department, pledging to retrain officers, improve oversight, and implement stricter policies against bias. While Evelyn knew that words alone could not undo the pain caused, the combination of public attention, legal action, and accountability created hope for real change. It was a victory for fairness, but also a reminder that vigilance, courage, and persistence were required to protect civil rights. As the day ended, Evelyn walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, feeling a sense of relief and quiet triumph. Reporters captured her smiling, dignified, a woman who had faced humiliation, prejudice, and intimidation, yet refused to bow. Her ordinary morning at the grocery store had transformed into a historic moment of justice. The money awarded was significant, but the real impact was the recognition of her courage, the affirmation that integrity and perseverance could overcome even the most unjust circumstances. Evelyn's story quickly became an inspiration across the nation. People shared her journey as a lesson in resilience, dignity, and the importance of standing up for what is right. The officers' actions were condemned, the city held accountable, and Evelyn Thompson emerged not just as a judge, but as a symbol of justice prevailing over prejudice. The ordinary act of shopping for groceries had ignited a movement, proving that courage and persistence could turn a personal injustice into a powerful statement for equality. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she had endured and accomplished. Her fight had been long and difficult, but justice had been served. The courtroom drama had ended. The city had paid its debt, and Evelyn Thompson had reminded the world that courage, integrity, and dignity could shine even in the darkest moments. her story would be remembered as a beacon of hope, showing that one person standing for justice could inspire an entire community and beyond. After the courtroom victory, Evelyn Thompson's life settled into a new rhythm. Though nothing would ever feel entirely ordinary again, the news of her legal triumph continued to echo across the city and the country. Her story had become more than a personal victory. It had grown into a symbol of courage, dignity, and the power of standing up for what is right. Evelyn reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple trip to the grocery store, realizing that one ordinary morning could transform into a moment that inspired thousands. Evelyn spent her mornings quietly now, sipping tea and reading the newspaper. But her thoughts often drifted to the people who had supported her, those who had believed in her when injustice threatened to overwhelm. Letters of gratitude arrived from citizens, lawyers, students, and activists who said her courage had motivated them to speak up against unfair treatment in their own lives. She felt humbled by the response, knowing that her actions had reached far beyond the walls of the courtroom, touching lives she would never meet. The city implemented the reforms it had promised, retraining officers, reviewing internal policies, and establishing programs to prevent bias in policing. Evelyn followed the progress closely, attending community meetings and offering her perspective when asked. Her goal was not to punish, but to ensure that no one else would endure what she had faced. Her influence extended into schools and civic organizations, where she spoke about fairness, justice, and the importance of standing firm in one's principles. Friends and family noticed a quiet transformation in Evelyn, a deeper sense of fulfillment and purpose. She had always been a respected judge, but now she had become a public figure representing integrity and resilience. People in her neighborhood waved and smiled more warmly than before, inspired by her steadfastness and her refusal to be intimidated. The ordinary grocery store, once a place of humiliation, now felt like a symbol of triumph, a reminder that courage could turn injustice into a catalyst for change. Evelyn often thought about Officer Reynolds, who had underestimated her calm and resolve. She did not dwell on anger, but rather on the lessons learned, that complacency in the face of injustice could never be allowed, that standing up with dignity, patience, and courage could achieve results far greater than fear or retaliation. She hoped that his actions would serve as a warning to others in positions of authority, that abuse of power would not go unchecked, and that fairness, integrity, and accountability were the true standards by which leaders should be judged. The community continued to honor Evelyn in small but meaningful ways. Local schools invited her to speak about civil rights, civic responsibility, and ethical leadership. Community centers displayed banners celebrating her courage, and social media continued to share her story as an example of how ordinary people could achieve extraordinary impact. Evelyn smiled quietly at these gestures, understanding that her experience had created a ripple effect, spreading awareness, encouraging dialogue, and inspiring action. Even in moments of solitude, Evelyn reflected on the ordinary events that had set everything into motion. The simple trip to the grocery store, the encounter that could have crushed her spirit, but instead became the spark for a larger fight for justice. She realized that courage was not about dramatic gestures, but about consistent integrity in everyday life, about refusing to accept injustice quietly, and about believing that one person could indeed make a difference. As the sun set each evening, Evelyn would sit by her window, looking out over the neighborhood she loved, feeling gratitude for the life she had, the community that had supported her, and the lessons she had learned. She knew her story would remain with her, and she hoped it would remain with others. A reminder that dignity and courage could overcome prejudice, that justice could prevail even against the odds, and that ordinary moments could sometimes spark extraordinary change. Evelyn Thompson had faced humiliation, prejudice, and public scrutiny, yet she had emerged stronger, wiser, and more influential than ever. Her legacy was not just the $1.5 million settlement, but the hope, inspiration, and change her courage had created. The ordinary morning that began with groceries had ended with a message for the world, that integrity, patience, And perseverance could transform lives, challenge systems, and ignite movements. And Evelyn knew that as long as people continued to stand for justice, her story would live on, inspiring countless others to do the same.